morning. Welcome to each one here. I was thinking about what to share, and as I was studying over the past week, a couple times, I like to stick my hand in my pocket to move this thing. As I was studying over the past week, I felt like God was leading me to this message, and I'd like to talk a little bit about kingdom authority, but I couldn't really close it up, if that makes sense. I couldn't really, I knew what I wanted to say, but I wasn't sure how to say it. And last night, I was kind of done studying, and I thought I'll just share what I have. And I was done, and I forget what the deal was, but anyway, there was this message that popped up from a friend of mine, and I listened to a little bit of it, and I went out and left my office after the fact and told my wife, I said, hey, you need to listen to that message. And it was something totally different, like it had nothing to do with really, or what I thought anyway. And it was kind of a little bit weird how I came across this message. And so I told her about it, and the message was on headship. And we were talking about it a little bit. Went throughout the evening, and this morning I went back to my office and was studying a little bit, and all of a sudden it hit me how this ties in, and it kind of closed out what I was wanting to communicate this morning, and I'm not going to really be talking about headship, but it has to do with authority and kingdom authority. How many of us love authority? We love to submit to authority. Okay? Nobody. We don't like to be told what to do, right? How many of you like to be told what to do? Not many of us. Certain times we do, but for the most part, and just how to live life, we don't like that. And thinking of authority, and I thought about, in thinking of headship, and like I said, headship isn't really what I'm going to be talking about this morning, but it ties in here. How many of you, especially as ladies, and even men, how many of you like to be asked, for the ladies, why do you wear that thing on your head? How many of you love that question by somebody in town or whatever? You just love that question. I remember as a teenage boy, or maybe even younger, being in town or maybe being with the youth group, and somebody would ask that question. And it was like, I really need something over here right now, and I hope the ladies got this figured out, and they know why they're wearing it, because I need something over here. Like, I've been there, and there's nobody raised their hand that they love the idea of or the question when that's asked, and so I think too many times we give them the short answer of, this is what the Bible says, and we believe the Bible, and that's why we do it. But I think there's so much more to it than that, if we think of headship. And I'd like for us to look into that a little bit, and maybe Junior or Daryl or somebody can have a message on headship and kind of the background. Why do we do it? Why do we do it? Why is it kind of a thing that we don't, it's almost a shameful thing. If it's what we're supposed to do, why are we bothered by somebody asking that question? And as I was thinking about kingdom authority and about the headship order, what if somebody asked you that question, that you as a lady could say, let me tell you about, or use this as an opportunity, let me tell you about my husband. Let me tell you about what Jesus has done for our family. and go in that way versus 1 Corinthians, give them the short answer and you leave, But let me tell you about what Jesus has done in our family and in the lives of my husband. And when I think, so I was thinking about it this morning too, these preachers that have glasses. I would like to have glasses on when I preach. They take them off when they're saying something really serious. So I would take it off right now. And I hope you get this as in, as I submit to authority, submit to Jesus in my life, my family can be successful. I can be successful as a leader. And I want you, if you forget anything else or everything else that I say, I want you to think about this. If we cannot, as whoever, if we can't get, or we will never have the authority over the things that God places under us until we get under the things that God has placed over us. And so as you're thinking about that, so as a dad, as I get under Jesus, as I am surrendered to Jesus, my family can say, I can be successful as a leader because I'm under Jesus, and then they have the opportunity to be under me. And like I said, I'm not going to be talking about headship, and I don't want us to be thinking about somebody else. I want us to be thinking about ourselves in this. And thinking about God, it's not God's plan that for you to be defeated by the world, the flesh, the devil. Jesus died, and he gave his children authority over those things. And so in thinking about this, we will never have victory over the things that God has placed under us if we're not willing to get under the things he has placed over us. So that's kind of where I would like to go with this message this morning. And I'd like for the children to give some input here. So I'm going to look at a man in the Bible that I see as a person that understood kingdom authority. And I'd like to look at the life of David a little bit. And we know David as a mighty warrior. We know him as a man who had he fought battles, and he was victorious in a lot of ways. Children, y'all remember what did he kill? What are some things that stood out to you in the life of David that he killed? Anybody? A lion, okay. What else? He killed a bear. A what? A giant. Okay, so those are three things that we remember. We remember he killed the lion. We remember he killed the bear and Goliath. What else did he kill? Lots of Philistines, right? So it talks about him being a mighty warrior. We know David as a man who fought many battles and was victorious. And it talks about, we'll talk about Saul a little bit, but we remember the story how David went out and had fought with the Philistines, and he came back and it says the people said that he's, however they worded, Saul has killed his thousands and David his tens of thousands or something like that. But basically they were saying he's a mighty man, he's a great warrior. But I'd like to talk about a victory that David had, not over somebody, but over himself. And turn with me to 1 Samuel chapter 24, and we're going to read 1 through 7. 24, 1 through 7. And it came to pass, when Saul was returned from following the Philistines, that it was told him, saying, Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of Israel and went to seek David and his men upon the rocks of the wild goats. And he came to the sheepcotes by the way, where was a cave, and Saul went in to cover his feet, and David and his men remained in the sides of the cave. And the men of David said unto him, Behold, the day of which the Lord said unto thee, Behold, I will deliver thine enemy into thine hand, that thou mayest do to him as it shall seem good unto thee. Then David arose and cut off the skirt of Saul's robe privily. And it came to pass afterward that David's heart smote him, because he had cut off Saul's skirt, and he said unto his men, The Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth mine hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. So David stayed his servants with these words, and suffered them not to rise against Saul. But Saul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. So I'd like to get a little bit of the background here. Saul is the king of Israel, and he was anointed by God to be the king of Israel. And if we go back a couple chapters, we know that Samuel had come to Saul and told him that he's going to be replaced. So he knew he was going to be replaced, and he knew that David was going to fill that position. So leading up to this, Saul had put tremendous amount of effort and energy into killing David. We see here he obviously was fighting with the Philistines, had a battle, and then he hears that David is in the mountains over in some cave, and so he goes over in that direction, and his intent is to kill David. Says he takes 3,000 hand-picked men, and he goes into this cave where David was. Now, I'd like to, in our house, the girls and Lane, they like to play hide and seek. So, and sometimes I play with them. And my rules for playing hide and seek is it has to be dark. You can't play in the daylight in hide and seek. So in our house, we turn off the lights, most of the lights, except for the main area, all the bedrooms, all the closets, everything's dark. And when they're looking, not only are they trying to find the other person, my goal is to kind of scare them as they're finding me. So think of being in a closet inside of a room that's dark, and they're coming out of the bright light. So when you step into that situation, you can't see anything, and that is the situation I think Saul was in coming into the cave. His eyes weren't accustomed to the light, and David was in there, obviously probably hiding in the, I don't know, let's say it's the sides of the cave, so I don't know if there was certain sections, but Saul couldn't see David. David can see Saul. And it says here that David's men encouraged him to kill Saul. They said, they even said in verse 4, it says, Behold, the day of the Lord, God has delivered him into your hands. Like, here's your opportunity. Take one swipe of your sword and kill him. And I don't know how many men David had with him, and I don't know how long this had been going on, but they encouraged him to do that. And obviously, probably in their minds, they were thinking, if we could just get rid of Saul, then we can get rid of all this running. We can get rid of sleeping in caves. We can get rid of, I don't know what their financial situation was. I don't, back in their day, but they obviously weren't working. So probably poor men. And I don't know how much of David's men, or how much that they knew that David was going to be king. I don't know about that. But there could have been some of that, like, goodbye to all of this, and now we can live in a palace. Here's your chance. And it was justifiable, really. David knew he was going to be king, and here was his chance. Saul was trying to kill him. But anyway, and we know how David, it says David gets up, and it doesn't say that he told his men he's not going to, but he gets up and he goes over to Saul and he cuts off a piece of his robe. And anyway, later on, as Saul leaves the cave, David goes out behind him, and obviously Saul was a ways off, and David hollers at him, and he raises up this piece that he had cut off of his robe and says, "Saul, look what I have." And then obviously Saul knew that David had been close to him, and I don't know what all went on there, but David showed that he was close enough to kill him and didn't kill him. And as I was thinking about that, David's life was miserable, and if he would have been living for self, it would have been his chance to, and you might say even justifiable, to kill Saul at that time. And the sad thing is, it's kind of what got me started on this message was I read a quote. It said something about Christians today are in a cult of self-realization. And I think I understood what that meant, but I actually looked it up just to make sure somebody didn't say something they were, or think in their minds what they were wanting to say. But it's actually something I'd never heard of it before. But self-realization, and when we live out of self-realization, the answers come from me. I'm number one. I'm dedicated, but I'm dedicated to self. And instead of being surrendered to Jesus. In self-realization, you are centered in you. I'd like to look at Proverbs 16:32. And I think this is a part that David understood. It says, "He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, but he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city." And I think this illustrates David very well. He had the opportunity to take vengeance on Saul, and he chose not to. Romans 12:21, and I don't think we'll read that. It says, "Be not overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good." And in thinking of authority or kingdom authority, and I know I talked about earlier about me being under Jesus and that making it easy for my family to be under me. But here was a situation where David chose to be under kingdom authority, even though it wasn't easy, even though Saul, as his authority, was unworthy. He chose to be under kingdom authority. And we see around us, we have a problem with authority in our world today. We see it in our churches, we see it in our streets, we see it in our families, we see it all around us. And Jesus said that in the last days, rebellion would abound, or iniquity would abound. And we see that. Somebody has once said that everything in the modern home is run by switches except for the children. And so we understand that people in general, our human tendency is to we don't like to be under authority. So, like I said, we need to learn how to be under those things that God has placed over us in order to be over the things that God has put under us. So, 3 things I'd like to point out. Number 1, we need to recognize kingdom authorities. 1 Samuel 24, 5 and 6. We'll turn back to that. It says, "And it came to pass that afterward David's heart smote him because he had cut off Saul's skirt, and he said unto his men, The Lord forbid that I should do this unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth mine hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord." David recognized that Saul was his authority, and it says his heart smote him Um, he was the king of Israel, and David understood that. Um, there was another time, and you might turn to that over in 1 Samuel 26, verses 6 through 9, where David had the opportunity to kill Saul again. And we'll just read 6 through 9, but actually, I don't think we will read 6 through 9. But Abishai and David went over into Saul's camp. And we know the story there, how Saul was sleeping. And it says that his spear was stuck in the ground by his side. And Abishai tells David, here's your chance. Again, he said, here's your chance. We're over here. Here's a spear. And it says, let me smite him once. And if you let me smite him once, I won't have to do it the second time. Meaning, I think, if you let me do it one time, I'll do it right. We won't have to worry about him again. And we know how that David's response to that, it says in verse 9, it says, and David said unto Abishai, destroy him not, for who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? Don't kill him. Here's our chance. And I think Abishai said the same thing again. Yeah, in verse 8 it says, God hath delivered him. Like he was saying, here's our chance. God has given us this opportunity to kill him. Going over to Romans 13, verses 1 through 5, I think David understood, this was long before or long after David's encounter here, but David understood something that I'd like for us to grasp this morning. And you say, well, Saul was an unworthy king, or Saul isn't my king. How does that apply to me today? But in Romans chapter 13, do we know who was king over this time, or who was ruler over this time? Anybody? It was Nero over this time. And look what Paul says in Romans 13, 1 through 5. It says, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Wherefore you must needs be subject, not only for wrath, so not only in case you did something against him, but also for conscience sake. So don't just submit to authority just because they have the authority to do something bad to you. Do it for conscience sake. And I think, like I said, if we look at the current ruler in Paul's time here, says let every soul, and I think that would apply to us today, even though we may encounter unworthy authority. There's still something about the idea that God has placed authority over us, and whether they are worthy or not, we need to recognize them. And I think too many times we kind of are like David's friends or David's armies. If you have the chance, you better take him now, and instead of letting God take care of that. David, I think it was David that said, God sets up kings and God takes kings down. So we need to recognize the authority in our lives. Thinking of Isaiah 14:13, do you know what made the devil the devil? What made the devil the devil? He rebelled against God, and that's what made the devil the devil. And in Isaiah 14, it talks about, I will ascend. I will set up, I think it says, I will exalt my throne. I will be like the Most High God. That was the devil, and that's what made the devil the devil. In 1 Samuel 15:23, this is where Samuel was talking to Saul, and they had come back from fighting the Amalekites, and we know the story how Saul didn't utterly destroy the Amalekites, and Samuel confronted him, and he says, in verse 23, for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry, because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king. And we know that David had the Spirit of God in him. And there's another scripture where it says that the Spirit of the Lord left Saul. And so we understand the difference in the spirits here. And it's just plain here. It says, if we are rebelling against authority, it's like practicing a sin as unto witchcraft. And as we rebel, when we rebel, we are in the devil's territory. It's pretty plain here. Somebody once said, you will never be more like the devil than when you're a rebel. And you'll never be more like Jesus than when you submit to his authority in your life. And you say, well, you have to, that's weak to not stand up for yourself, like David here. That's weak. He had the opportunity. He was going to be king. People are going to take advantage of you if you don't stand up for authority. And I'm not talking about, David obviously didn't approve of what Saul was doing. David didn't say, he's my authority, I'm going to approve of everything he's doing. I'm not saying that. I don't think we should approve of everything that's going on. We don't blindly obey government when it's not following Scripture. And I've heard this before, that the church is not the master of the state. The church is not the servant of the state, but it should be the conscience of the state. And so maybe we're not out there, we're not out there blindly obeying, is I guess what I'm saying. And we need to recognize the authority that God placed over us. Number 2, we must respect kingdom authority. So recognize and then respect kingdom authority. 1 Samuel 24, go back there again. Verses 8 through 15. It says, David also arose afterward and went out of the cave and cried after Saul, saying, my lord the king. And when Saul looked behind him, David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed himself. And David said to Saul, wherefore hearest thou men's words, saying, behold, David seeketh thy hurt. Behold, this day thine eyes have seen how that the Lord hath delivered thee today into mine hand in the cave, and some bade me kill thee, but mine eyes spared thee. And I said, I will not put forth mine hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. Moreover, my father, see the skirt of thy robe in my hand, for in that I cut off thy skirt, and killed thee not. Know thou and see that there is neither evil nor transgression in mine hand, and I have not sinned against thee, yet thou huntest my soul to take it. The Lord judge between me and thee, and the Lord avenge me of thee, but mine hand shall not be upon thee. And as said the proverb of the ancients, wickedness proceedeth from the wicked, but mine hand shall not be upon thee. And after whom is the king of Israel come out? After whom dost thou pursue? After a dead dog? After a flea? The Lord, therefore, be judge and judge between me and thee, and see and plead my cause, and deliver me out of thine hand. I hope you understand that. This is the hard part where David not only recognized authority, but he respected authority. We see how he comes out and he bows himself to the ground. It says, "The Lord avenge between me and thee, but my hand shall not be upon thee." And he even gave Saul the benefit of the doubt here. He said, maybe you're hearing the wrong thing from people. Gave him the benefit of the doubt. And I think too many times in our lives, we understand the concept of being under authority, and we understand that we need to. But we're too much like the little boy. This was a little boy, and I'm not sure who this was, but probably a 3 to 5 year old little boy. And his mom told him, she said, "Sit down." And he wouldn't sit down. So she says again, "Sit down." And he didn't sit down. So she takes him with two hands, and she sets him on the chair and sits him down. And the little boy sat there for a little bit, and then he looked at his mom and he said, "But I'm standing up on the inside." And I think too many times that is how we deal with authority. We're sitting down, we're grudgingly getting under authority, but we're standing up at the same time. Jude 8 and 9. I'd like for you to, this is something that I'm going to just put out there. I don't know if it's how accurate it is. If I can find it here. Jude 8 and 9 says, "Likewise also these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominion," don't like authority, "and speak evil of dignities. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, The Lord rebuke you." And I thought of that, like, I don't know, but even as the devil and Michael, the archangel, was it because the devil was who he was or who he once was that Michael said, I'm going to have the dignity and not talk disrespectfully? I don't know. Look into that a little more. I don't have a whole lot more to say on that. But I thought of us as parents, especially in relating to authority, when we criticize authority in front of our children or at the dinner table or supper table, whatever, and then we wonder why they rebel. And obviously, my family is young enough, but that's something for me to be careful in, is criticizing authority because they catch on to that. And then later, I wonder why they are critical of me. I'd like to look at 1 Peter 2. Verses 18 through 20. "Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and the gentle, but also to the froward. For this is thankworthy, if a man for conscience toward God endure grief, suffering wrongfully. For what glory is it, if when you are buffeted for your faults, you shall take it patiently? But if when you do it well and suffer for it, you take it patiently, this is acceptable with God." Here it's very clear. It's not only for those who treat us well. It's not always that easy. I'd like to look at one more here. Not only do we recognize kingdom authority, not only should we respect it, but we should also rest in kingdom authority. Um, Notice what David said in 1 Samuel chapter 24 in verse 15. He says, "The Lord therefore be judge, and judge between me and thee, and see, and plead my cause, and deliver me out of thine hand." Um, he understood the spirit that's in Romans chapter 12 that we read earlier. I think I read that. 19 through 21. "Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him to drink. For in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good." And David understood that. David recognized that, and David rested in the fact that God was God, and God would take care of him and Saul. And we see Saul's response to that in verses 16 through 19 of 1 Samuel 24. Says, "And it came to pass when David had made an end of speaking these words," this was after Saul or David showed him the piece that he had cut off, says, Saul said, "Is this my voice, my son David?" And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. And he said to David, "Thou art more righteous than I, for thou hast rewarded me good, whereas I have rewarded thee evil. And thou shalt show this day, and thou hast showed this day, how that thou hast dealt well with me, for as much as when the Lord hath delivered me into thine hand, thou killest me not. For if a man find his enemy, will he let him go away well away? Wherefore the Lord reward thee good, for thou hast done unto me this day." So here we see that even Saul recognized that David went above what was natural to human tendency. Saul acknowledges that. And as we deal with authority in our life, sometimes it doesn't come naturally. But I'd like for us to really get the idea of whether it's you're struggling with somebody in your life that's under you, or whether you're struggling with the things that God has put under you, whether it's, the devil or sin, or that you just can't seem to defeat. I'd like for us to take a look at maybe the things that are over us that we're not willing to get under. And so that's the challenge I'd like to leave with all of us. Unless we're willing to get under the things that God has placed over us, we will never be able to get over the things that God has placed under us. So that's my challenge to each one of us. And as we, especially as fathers, as dads, that we could be successful leaders, we have to be successful in submitting to Jesus as well. That way our wife or our girl can say, let me tell you about my dad. Let me tell you about what Jesus has done in the life of our family. So that's my challenge. I will turn the time over to Junior.